My name is Sarah Mitchell, and I'm 32 years old. For as long as I can remember, I've been the kind of woman who put everything into her marriage. I met my husband, Daniel, 10 years ago at a friend's party, and I knew he was the one the moment I laid eyes on him. We got married 3 years later, and life seemed perfect until the day it wasn't. Our 6th wedding anniversary was supposed to be special. I had planned everything meticulously: dinner reservations at our favorite restaurant, a beautiful gift I'd saved up for, and a heartfelt letter about how much he meant to me. But that day, Daniel was acting strange. He claimed he had an urgent meeting at work and promised he'd meet me for dinner later. I believed him because I wanted to. Love does that to you. It blinds you to the obvious. By 8 p.m., I was sitting at the restaurant alone, staring at the flickering candle in front of me. He wasn't answering his phone, and I felt the creeping embarrassment of the waitstaff's pitying glances. I paid the bill and went home, hoping he'd have a good explanation. When he finally walked through the door at midnight, his shirt untucked, smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't mine, I knew something was wrong. But I stayed silent, my heart pounding as I watched him walk into the bathroom. He seemed nervous, avoiding my gaze, mumbling excuses about work running late. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I did something I'd never done before. I checked his phone while he was snoring beside me. That's when I found the messages. The texts were from his ex-girlfriend, Emily. She was his first love, the one he always said was ancient history. Their conversation was flirty, with her saying how much she missed him and how great it felt to catch up after all these years. My blood ran cold when I read her last text. Tonight was perfect. I'll never forget it. Happy anniversary, my love. Happy anniversary? My stomach churned as I realized the truth. While I had been sitting alone at our favorite restaurant, Daniel had been spending our special day with her. I confronted him the next morning. At first, he denied everything, but when I shoved the phone in his face, he stammered out some excuse about how it wasn't what it looked like. She needed closure, he said, as if that made it better. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, instead I smiled, a cold, deliberate smile that even surprised me. That's when I decided. Emily would never see Daniel again. I spent the next few days replaying Daniel's betrayal over and over in my mind. I could barely eat or sleep, consumed by a searing mixture of heartbreak and anger. But amidst the pain, something clicked inside me, a determination I didn't know I had. If Daniel thought he could humiliate me and get away with it, he was wrong. And Emily, she had no idea what was coming. I started by learning everything I could about her. Thankfully, she wasn't hard to find. A quick scroll through her public social media profiles told me everything I needed to know. She was 34, single, and worked as a marketing manager for a boutique firm in the city. She posted regularly, pictures of her yoga classes, her favorite coffee spots, even selfies at the gym. It was clear she thrived on attention. But the most interesting part, Emily wasn't as innocent as Daniel claimed. Through some mutual friends and a few carefully worded messages, I discovered she had a reputation for being a homewrecker. She had dated 2 other married men before Daniel, both of whom eventually left their wives for her. She had a pattern, and I wasn't about to let her add me to her list of victims. I decided to play the long game. Revenge isn't something you rush, it's an art, and every move must be calculated. My first step was to make Emily feel like she was being watched. I created a fake social media account complete with photos of a stylish woman who looked like she belonged in Emily's world. I used this account to follow her and subtly comment on her posts, dropping hints that I knew more than I should. For example, when she posted a picture of a candlelit dinner with the caption, "The perfect evening," I commented, "Too bad he's someone else's husband." She deleted it within minutes, but not before I saw her respond with a panicked, "Who is this?" That's when I knew I had her attention. Meanwhile, I kept a close eye on Daniel. He seemed to believe my act of forgiveness. Assuming we were moving past the incident, I didn't let on that I knew he was still sneaking around with Emily. He'd leave the house under the pretense of work meetings or errands, but I'd catch him texting her late at night or finding excuses to leave early in the morning. Every lie he told was fuel for the fire building inside me. One day, I decided it was time to take things further. I needed to see Emily face to face, but not as myself. I booked an appointment at the salon she frequented. She had tagged them in several Instagram posts and introduced myself to the staff as Claire, a woman new to the area. I casually asked about Emily, pretending to admire her hair in a photo on the salon's page. The stylist gushed about how sweet and beautiful Emily was, which made me want to roll my eyes, but I played along. By the time I left the salon, I had gathered enough information to know Emily's routine. She worked out every morning at 6:30 a.m., always at the same boutique gym. She grabbed her coffee at a trendy cafe nearby and usually worked late on Thursdays, often staying at the office until 9 p.m. This was valuable intel, but I wasn't ready to confront her just yet. I wanted to make her paranoid first. Over the next few weeks, I escalated my campaign. I sent her anonymous messages.
Does Daniel know you're not his first choice?
You look good in that red dress, but you'll never be as good as me. Homewrecking suits you, too bad it never ends well. Each message was carefully timed to coincide with moments she was most likely to be alone. I wanted her to feel vulnerable, exposed, and unsettled. And it worked. Emily started posting less frequently, and when she did, her captions were shorter, her tone more cautious. She even set her profile to private, which only made me smile. I wasn't just getting under her skin, I was living rent-free in her head. But my ultimate goal was still out of reach. As much as I wanted to ruin her life from behind a screen, I knew the real victory would come from a face-to-face encounter. I needed her to look me in the eye and understand that she'd crossed the wrong woman. The perfect opportunity presented itself when Daniel mentioned he'd be working late on a Thursday. I followed him to a cozy little restaurant on the other side of town where he and Emily were seated at a corner table, laughing like carefree teenagers. It took everything in me not to storm in and confront them right then and there, but I reminded myself that patience was key. Instead, I took a photo of them through the window and sent it to Emily from my fake account captioned, "You both look so happy. Enjoy it while it lasts." Her smile vanished the moment she looked at her phone. Daniel noticed her change in demeanor, leaning in to ask what was wrong, but she shook her head and forced a smile. It was a small victory, but it was enough to keep me going. This wasn't over, not even close.
The morning after I sent Emily the photo, I woke up with a sense of purpose. Things were progressing exactly as I'd planned. She was unnerved, Daniel was oblivious, and the stage was set for the next phase of my revenge. If Emily thought a few anonymous messages were the extent of what I was capable of, she was sorely mistaken. I spent that day preparing my next move. I had already studied Emily's habits, but now I needed to manipulate them to my advantage. One thing about her routine stood out. Every Thursday, she worked late at the office. It wasn't just a pattern, it was a golden opportunity.
Using the fake social media account, I sent her another message. "If you think you can keep sneaking around, you're wrong. I know exactly where you'll be tonight." I timed it perfectly, sending it while I knew she'd be on her way to work. Less than a minute later, I saw the seen notification. I imagined her gripping her phone, scanning the street nervously, wondering who was watching her. It was almost too easy. That evening, I dressed carefully, nothing too flashy, but enough to make an impression. A fitted black coat, heeled boots, and just a touch of red lipstick. I wanted her to remember me. I waited outside her office building, positioned near the entrance, but just out of sight. My heart was racing, but it wasn't fear, it was adrenaline, the thrill of knowing I was about to confront the woman who thought she could destroy my marriage. At 8:45 p.m., I saw her. She was alone, walking briskly toward the parking lot with her phone clutched tightly in her hand. I stepped into her path, and the look on her face when she recognized me was priceless. Shock, fear, and a flicker of guilt all rolled into one. "Emily," I said, my voice calm but cold, "we need to talk." She hesitated, glancing around as if she was looking for an escape. "I don't know who you think you are, but—" "I'm Sarah," I interrupted. "Daniel's wife, ring a bell." Her face turned pale. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered the text, the lies, and the smug look on her face in that photo with my husband, and my sympathy evaporated. "I know everything," I continued, stepping closer. "I know about the messages, the dinners, the sneaking around, and I know you're not as smart as you think you are. Did you really think I wouldn't find out?" She finally found her voice, but it was shaky. "It's not what you think, save it," I snapped. "I don't care about your excuses. What I care about is making sure you never see my husband again." She straightened up, trying to regain some composure. "Daniel came to me. He said things between you two weren't working, that he needed closure. I was just trying to help." I laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Closure? Is that what you call spending my anniversary with him? Sharing candlelit dinners and sending flirty texts? You're not helping anyone but yourself, Emily. You're a homewrecker, and we both know it. She flinched at the word, but I didn't stop. This ends now. You're going to delete his number, block him on every platform, and stay out of our lives. If you don't, I'll make sure everyone you know finds out exactly who you are and what you've been doing.
Her eyes widened. You wouldn't.
Try me, I said, my voice low and steady. I have all the proof I need. Screenshots of your messages, photos of you two together, even the receipts for the dinner you shared on my anniversary. How do you think your boss would react if they saw it? Or your friends, your family? Emily was silent, her face pale and drawn. She knew she was cornered. Stay away from him, I said, turning to leave. This is your one and only warning. I walked away without looking back, my heels clicking against the pavement. My heart was pounding, but I felt a surge of satisfaction. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like I had control. But as I drove home, my mind raced with possibilities. Would Emily really stay away, or would she try to fight back? And what about Daniel? How would he react when he found out what I'd done? I realized then that this wasn't over, not yet. Emily might have been rattled, but I couldn't trust her to stay gone. If I wanted to ensure she never saw Daniel again, I'd have to take things even further. The confrontation with Emily was satisfying, but I knew it wasn't enough. People like her don't give up easily. She might be scared now, but fear fades, and desperation can make people bold. I couldn't leave anything to chance. If Emily had even the faintest hope of getting Daniel back, she'd find a way to worm her way back into his life. I had to make sure she didn't. The first thing I did when I got home was act as if nothing had happened. Daniel greeted me with a smile, completely unaware of the storm brewing behind my calm exterior. "How was your day?" he asked casually, flipping through channels on the TV. "Busy," I replied, forcing a smile. "Just errands. You know how it is." It was laughable how easily he bought my act. He didn't suspect a thing. That night, as he fell asleep beside me, I stared at the ceiling, thinking about my next move. Emily was only part of the problem. Daniel was just as guilty, and he needed to learn that actions have consequences.
The following day, I started planting seeds. I knew Emily couldn't resist checking her messages even after our confrontation. I sent her another one from my fake account. I hope you've taken my warning seriously, but just in case, I've started talking to people who'd love to hear your story. Stay away from him.
I imagined her reading it, panicking, wondering if I was bluffing, and then I did something she wouldn't expect. I went to her workplace. Her office was in a trendy part of town, all glass walls and minimalist decor. I walked in confidently, pretending to be a prospective client. The receptionist greeted me with a polished smile, and I asked if I could speak to Emily. "It's a personal matter," I said, lowering my voice as if I didn't want to draw attention. "Just a quick conversation." The receptionist hesitated, then made a call. Moments later, Emily appeared, her face tight with irritation. When she saw me, her expression shifted to one of disbelief and barely concealed panic. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, pulling me aside. "I wanted to make sure we're clear," I said calmly, "because if we're not, I can just as easily walk into your boss's office and tell them everything." Her eyes darted around nervously, making sure no one was listening. "Are you insane? You can't just show up here." "I can and I will," I said firmly. "This is your last chance, Emily. Stay away from Daniel or I'll destroy everything you've built, your career, your reputation, everything." She opened her mouth to argue, but then closed it, defeated. "Fine," she muttered. "I'll stay away."
I leaned in closer, my voice low and venomous. "Good. Because if you don't, I'll make sure you regret it." I left her standing there, visibly shaken, but as much as I wanted to believe she'd back off, I wasn't convinced. People like Emily didn't know when to quit, and that's what made them dangerous. Back at home, I turned my attention to Daniel. He was the root of all this, and he needed to be held accountable. That evening, while he was in the shower, I took his phone and forwarded some of Emily's texts to my fake account just in case he decided to delete them later. I also went through his call logs and noted the times he'd been in contact with her. I needed more leverage, so I hired a private investigator. I knew it was extreme, but I wasn't taking any chances. If Daniel was still meeting Emily, I needed proof, and the investigator delivered. Within a week, I had photos of them together at a coffee shop, her hand on his arm, their heads close as they talked. It was infuriating, but it also gave me exactly what I needed. One night, after dinner, I casually mentioned to Daniel that I'd been thinking about our anniversary. It was a little disappointing, wasn't it? I said, watching his reaction closely.
He looked up from his plate, caught off guard. Yeah, I guess work just got in the way, you know?
I smiled sweetly. It's funny, I was looking through your phone the other night and I saw some messages from Emily. Do you want to explain why you were with her on our anniversary? His face drained of color. Sarah, Don't bother lying, I said, cutting him off. I know everything, the messages, the dinner, all of it. And before you try to deny it, I have pictures.
Daniel sat there speechless, his fork frozen halfway to his mouth. For the first time, he looked genuinely scared. I gave you everything, I continued, my voice shaking with controlled fury. My time, my trust, my love, and this is how you repay me, by sneaking around with your ex? He tried to apologize, but I wasn't interested in his excuses. Save it, I said coldly. You don't get to play the victim here. You made your bed, Daniel, and now you're going to lie in it. I stood up, looking down at him with all the disgust I felt. Here's how this is going to go. You're going to end things with Emily, completely. No texts, no calls, no meetings. If I even suspect that you're still in contact with her, I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of man you are. Your friends, your colleagues, your family, I'll tell them all. He nodded silently, his face a mix of shame and fear, but I wasn't done yet. And don't think for a second that I'm letting this go. You're going to earn my forgiveness, Daniel, and until then, consider yourself on probation. That night, I lay awake, wondering if I was doing the right thing. Part of me wanted to end the marriage right then and there, but another part wanted to see him suffer, to make him feel the pain he'd caused me. And as for Emily, I wasn't finished with her yet.
After my confrontation with Daniel, the house fell into an icy silence. Every conversation between us was clipped, our interactions reduced to a tense game of avoidance. I watched him like a hawk, tracking his every move. His phone rarely left his side now, but it didn't matter. I had installed spyware on it. Every text, every call, every app notification, it all came to me. Trust was dead, and in its place, vigilance thrived. As for Emily, I wasn't content to let her off the hook. I wanted her to feel the consequences of her actions just as much as I wanted Daniel to feel mine. Revenge isn't just about justice, it's about ensuring they never forget who they crossed.
The private investigator I had hired proved more useful than I anticipated. Not only did I have photos of Daniel and Emily's recent meetings, but I also discovered that Emily had a professional vulnerability. Her company had a strict policy against personal scandals. They prided themselves on being a family-friendly brand, and any public controversy involving their employees could mean termination. Armed with this information, I decided it was time for Emily to face the music. I sent an anonymous email to her company's HR department. In it, I included the photos of her and Daniel, framing the situation as an affair that could damage the company's reputation. I kept my language professional, signing off as a concerned individual. It didn't take long for the email to have an impact. Within days, Emily's Instagram went silent, her previously cheerful posts replaced by radio silence. A mutual acquaintance later confirmed what I suspected. Emily had been called into a meeting with HR and put on probation. She was furious, claiming it was a misunderstanding, but the damage was done. Her career was on thin ice, and I knew she wouldn't be taking any more risks. But while Emily's life was unraveling, I had a new problem. Daniel's behavior was becoming increasingly suspicious. Despite my warnings and his promises, he still wasn't fully transparent with me. One night, when he left the house claiming he was going for a late-night drive to clear his head, I decided to follow him. I stayed a safe distance behind as he drove across town, my heart pounding with a mix of anger and anticipation. When he finally pulled into a dimly lit parking lot, I saw her, Emily. She was standing by her car, arms crossed, her face a mask of irritation. I parked far enough away to avoid being seen, but close enough to hear their conversation. I rolled down my window just enough to catch their voices. "Why are you here, Daniel?" Emily demanded, her tone sharp. "I told you, we can't keep doing this." "I just needed to talk to you," he replied, his voice pleading. She knows everything. She's making my life a living hell." "Good," she snapped. "You deserve it. You lied to me, Daniel. You told me your marriage was over. Do you have any idea what you've done to my life?" "Oh, don't act like a victim," he shot back. "You knew I was married when you got involved."
Their argument escalated, their voices rising with every exchange. I sat there watching the cracks in their relationship widen. It was almost poetic. Two people who had conspired to betray me now turning on each other. When Daniel finally stormed back to his car and drove off, I waited until Emily was alone before stepping out of my vehicle. She froze when she saw me, her face a mixture of shock and fear.
"I warned you," I said, my voice calm but laced with menace. "But you just couldn't stay away, could you?" "Sarah, please," she began, but I cut her off. "Save it," I said coldly. "You and Daniel deserve each other, but let me make one thing clear. If you ever so much as breathe in his direction again, I'll destroy what's left of your life. You think losing your job was bad? Try losing everything. Yeah." She didn't respond, just stared at me with wide eyes. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost, yet. But then I remembered how she'd smiled in those photos, how she'd flaunted her relationship with my husband without a care for who it hurt, and my pity evaporated. That night, when Daniel returned home, I confronted him. "I saw you with Emily," I said, watching his face pale. "So much for cutting ties." "I was saying goodbye," he stammered. "I swear it's over now." "You've said that before," I replied, my voice icy. "And yet, here we are."
He begged for forgiveness, swearing that he'd never see her again, but I wasn't interested in his promises anymore. Trust wasn't something he could earn back with words. It had to be proven,
And even then, it might never be enough. As I lay in bed that night, I realized something. My revenge wasn't just about Emily or Daniel, it was about reclaiming my power. For years, I had been the dutiful wife, the one who put everyone else's needs before her own, but not anymore. I was done being a victim. There was still one more piece of the puzzle to put in place before this chapter could be closed. The day after catching Daniel with Emily again, I woke up feeling a strange sense of clarity. The anger, the heartbreak, it was still there, but it was muted, replaced by a cold determination. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about ending this chapter of my life on my terms. The first thing I did was call a lawyer. I had avoided this step for weeks, hoping there might still be something left to salvage in my marriage, but after seeing Daniel's true colors, I knew there was no going back. The lawyer, a sharp woman named Melissa, listened patiently as I explained everything. Daniel's affair, the texts, the lies.
"You're in a strong position," she said confidently. "You have proof of his infidelity, which will work in your favor during the divorce proceedings, and if you want, we can make this as painful for him as possible." "I want him to feel what I felt," I said, my voice steady, "and I want to make sure Emily never crawls back into his life." Melissa smiled. "Consider it done." While the legal wheels were set in motion, I focused on executing the final phase of my plan. If Daniel thought he could walk away from this unscathed, he was about to learn otherwise. And Emily, she'd already lost her job and her reputation, but I wasn't done with her yet. Using the evidence I had collected, photos of Daniel and Emily together, screenshots of their messages, and even a few receipts from their secret rendezvous, I created an anonymous email account. From there, I sent everything to a carefully curated list of recipients: Daniel's colleagues, his boss, a few of our mutual friends, and even some of Emily's acquaintances. The email was short and to the point. "To whom it may concern,
I thought you should know the truth about Daniel Mitchell and Emily Carter. Their affair has not only destroyed a marriage, but also betrayed the trust of everyone who believed in them. Attached are some details you may find interesting. Do with this information what you will." I hit send and sat back, waiting for the fallout. It didn't take long. Within hours, the whispers started. Mutual friends began reaching out, shocked and appalled by what they had seen. Daniel's boss called him in for a meeting, citing concerns about how his personal behavior might reflect on the company. And Emily, she was suddenly persona non grata among her social circle, her carefully curated image shattered. Daniel confronted me that evening, his face red with anger. "How could you do this?" he demanded, slamming the printed email on the table. "How could I not?" I replied, meeting his glare. "You humiliated me, lied to me, and betrayed me. This is me returning the favor." "You've ruined my life," he shouted.
"No, Daniel," I said calmly. "You ruined your life the moment you decided to cheat on me. I'm just making sure everyone knows the truth." Over the next few weeks, things unraveled for Daniel. His reputation at work was in tatters, and rumors about his affair spread like wildfire. Emily, meanwhile, was barely holding on. A mutual acquaintance told me she had moved out of her apartment and was staying with a friend, trying to figure out her next steps.
I could have stopped there, but I wanted closure. So I arranged one final meeting with Daniel, choosing a public cafe to ensure he couldn't cause a scene. When he arrived, he looked haggard, dark circles under his eyes, his clothes wrinkled, his confidence gone. "I'm filing for divorce," I said, sliding the papers across the table. "I've already signed them. All that's left is your signature." He stared at the papers, his jaw tightening. "Sarah, please, we can fix this." "No, we can't," I replied firmly. "You made your choice, Daniel. Now, I'm making mine."
He tried to argue, but I cut him off. "This isn't up for debate. Sign the papers and we can both move on. Or refuse, and I'll make sure this drags out as publicly and painfully as possible. Your choice." Reluctantly, he picked up the pen and signed. As I walked away from that cafe, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. For the first time in months, I was free from the lies, the pain, and the toxic cycle Daniel and Emily had dragged me into.
The divorce was finalized within weeks, and I got everything I asked for: the house, a generous settlement, and the satisfaction of knowing Daniel would feel the consequences of his actions for years to come. Emily disappeared from my radar entirely. Some mutual friends said she had moved to another city, starting over where no one knew her story. Good riddance.
As for me, I focused on rebuilding my life. I started a new job, reconnected with old friends, and even signed up for a pottery class I'd always wanted to try. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine, and that was enough.
One day, while scrolling through my phone, I stumbled upon an old photo of Daniel and me, taken on our honeymoon. I stared at it for a moment before deleting it, feeling no sadness or regret. He was a part of my past, but that's where he belonged, behind me. And as for revenge, it wasn't just sweet, it was liberating. Thank you for following along with Sarah's gripping journey. Let me know if you'd like me to craft another story or explore a different idea.